It is March 28th, Monday night at 7 o'clock, and calling to order Committee of the Whole for the City of Gahanna City Council. The first item on our agenda tonight is discussions, board and commission vacancies. And Mr. Van Meter brought to our attention that there are still, there are two council appointment vacancies for two boards. The first is the Local Board of Tax Review for the term ending 12/31 of '23. And the second is on the CRA Housing Council for a term ending 12/31 of '22. The CRA Housing Council meets once per year, I believe, as does the Local Board of Tax Review. I believe that there were no pending applications in the onboard system for either of these. So I believe the hope is to solicit applications and speak to folks that we know who might be interested in serving on these councils or boards to put in their applications. And this was added to the agenda tonight to make sure everyone on council had this awareness and could share this out to our respective groups and make sure that it was posted on the city website, on the council page. Anything else, Mr. Van Meter, on this subject?
The only thing to add was for the Local Board of Tax Review, I did talk with Director Burry, and she did stress it would be, great to have a council appointee, as this is by statute, a required board for the city. And then, as you had indicated, for the CRA Housing Council, they do meet once, and it looks like in the fall.
Yes, any discussion? Mr. Renner?
So the local board of tax review, when do they next meet?
I believe it's only as needed if there's an appeal that comes up. I don't believe they've had any
Okay, they
meetings.
don't have a standing anything?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct, as needed.
Any other discussion? Okay, the onboard system is live, so please direct folks to that. And Mr. Van Meter, if you could send out an email to council members and make sure that that's posted on the council page of the website.
Yes, I will.
Didn't you, excuse me,
Yes.
did you say that Joanne Burry said to have somebody from council?
I'm sorry, it's a council appointment?
Appointment, but
Yeah,
I thought
so you,
that it would be potentially somebody from council. I misunderstood what you said. Yes, I thought-
correct, yes, so a resident that would be appointed by
Because I was
council.
going to volunteer. No problem. Once a year? No problem.
Yes, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a deadline for applications?
I think the hope is to fill this as soon as possible, and then at council president's discretion, perhaps set this on the agenda and review applications in executive session. Okay.
Should we set a deadline, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Yeah,
I think it depends on, as applications come in, that we have applications to consider for these spots.
Okay.
I think the undercurrent is that number one is the local board of tax review is actually important, that we actually, from what I hear from Joanne's message to Jeremy, is that we need to get somebody ASAP.
All right. Anything else? All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is items from the Department of Planning, Ordinance 0015, 2022. I think Mr. Blackford is joining us tonight.
Indeed, I am. Thank you. Very brief presentation here. It's really just one slide. As you may have heard from some of the discussion out in the audience here before the meeting, the rental program is up and running. It is live. With that, anytime we have new code that we write and implement, inevitably there's always changes that are required. We run into all sorts of different scenarios, and so there's a few code changes we're proposing here tonight. The main one would be to create an exemption for dwellings that are occupied by a family member of the owner. So right now, the way the code reads is if you own a piece of property and somebody else lives there, that's automatically considered a rental. And as we're getting an influx of folks, since the program's live here, they're talking to us. Some of the, there's a handful of scenarios where maybe, it's owned and maybe it's a parent or a son or a daughter that lives there, but it's not for rent, meaning that there's no money or sort of an exchange of services. So if this code section is passed, they would be exempt and they wouldn't have to go through the biennial registration. That's our second change. It's just a minor typo in the original where it was biannual. This is biennial, meaning that it's every 2 years is the registration and inspection process. We've also changed the
I'd just like to point out, Councilwoman McGregor pointed that out last time, and it was my fault making sure that I did not follow up and get that changed to biennial instead of biannual.
And the other change is to align the appeal period, which right now it says 14 days, make it 30 days, which is consistent with the appeals section of Chapter 7. Also here tonight, respectfully requesting a waiver in emergency. This marks the second time I've ever requested this. And the reason why is that, these code changes are up and live and running. Right now is the registration period. So if we don't ask for a waiver in emergency, it wouldn't really be effective probably until like late May at the earliest. The registration would already have passed, so then it wouldn't be able to implement these changes until 2024. So that's why we're requesting the waiver in emergency. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Blackford. I appreciate the responsiveness that the department is showing to identifying some issues that are coming up with the implementation of this policy.
Our pleasure, yes.
Any discussion or questions?
Consent.
Since it's waiver and emergency, I think we should put it on regular agenda, but with waiver and emergency on regular agenda, please.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thought that was something that we kind of changed last year, Ms. Angelou, and I thought that was a good change that Mr.
Not a
Lyric had
problem.
made. Okay. All right, item D, from the Department of Public Service and Engineering, Ordinance 16-2022. Mr. Crawford.
Good evening, Council. The first item I have for you this evening is a request to enter into contract for the 2022 street program. I'd like to provide a brief review of the processes and steps that we take to generate the yearly pavement maintenance program. So the first step that we do is we perform a pavement condition rating of every street in the city. We drive all 130 centerline miles and end up rating roughly 1,200 street segments to assess the pavement condition of it. We then take the lowest rated street first, and we start working our way up. So we start to assess each street. We determine what the major maintenance is for it, whether it's a resurfacing, patching, crack seal, or if it needs complete reconstruction because there's no other maintenance items that could be completed to it. From there, we also start generating quantities for the bid. So, lineal feet of curb, square yards of asphalt, gallons of tack. We compile all that information together to complete the bid. Once all that information has been gathered together for the bid, we present it to City Council and request permission to bid, which we completed back in February. Council graciously approved permission to bid our program. And then following Council's approval, we end up advertising, publicly advertising the pavement maintenance program for 2 weeks. Following the advertisement, we opened bids on March 18th, and then our team started to review those bids. We review every aspect of the bid for any errors and omissions. We ensure that everything is included that's required to be included in those bids. And then we also assess whether it is a responsive and responsible bid as required by Gahanna City Code and Ohio Revised Code. Code sets out 10 different criteria that we review to assess whether it's responsive and responsible. This year, we received 2 responsive and responsible bidders, one being Strasser Paving and the other one Decker Construction. So following Gahanna codified ordinances as well as a Ohio Revised Code, we are respectfully requesting to award the contract to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Code specifies that we are to award it to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So we are here tonight to request legislation to enter into contract with him. With Strasser Paving, I'm sorry, I did not specify.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Any questions or discussion?
I have a question. In the way it's broken down for the amounts, it has $2 million plus amounts coming from exactly the same fund. Is that correct?
So the breakdown there is one of those amounts is the rebuild dollars that were provided from capital. The other is the overlay dollars.
Okay.
So they come in as separate line items, but they're both attributed to this contract.
And they're both from the same fund? Exact?
I would have to double check that. We put this on here as an informational item to let you know
Okay.
what we're applying to it. There's no action that's being taken. No funds are actually being moved. Council has already appropriated those funds in the yearly budget process. So it could be an error. We'll double check that.
Ms. Bowers?
Yes, Ms. Angelou.
Strasser was the one last year, was it? Am I
Correct.
correct? Were there any issues with them? I had heard somehow, I'm remembering that there were some potentially things that had gone wrong or weren't very done, or am I mistaken?
As with any construction contract, whether it's the street program or road widening or anything, we always run into some sort of challenge, some sort of concern or issue. It's very standard for contracts, especially a $4.5 million contract, to run into challenges and concerns. That is exactly why we staff inspectors, we staff a project administrator, a city engineer, to go out to inspect this work and ensure that's conforming to the standards and specifications. Things always arise. There's 50 to 100 laborers and operators out there. There's 10 to 20 different crews. There's a lot of work going on. Things will get missed. Things will happen. It is standard for any contractor, any contract to have issues, and that's why we have our dedicated staff out there to manage it, investigate it, and address it.
Well, thank you. And I would like to say another part of this was a friend of mine had their street done and were just raving about how wonderful it was. So that's the other part, but I just wanted to make sure that there was nothing more than just the regular things that might happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Weaver, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a follow-up to Ms. Angelou's comments, I am aware that there were several constituent concerns raised about some of the curbs crumbling. I believe it's called honeycombing. And was curious if our inspections and reviews have led to those complaints being addressed or those specific locations being remedied.
Yes, and excuse me, I'm gonna cough in the microphone. So honeycombing, to anyone who is maybe not familiar with that, it is when you pour concrete, if the concrete is not as liquid as some mixes may be, it comes out, I don't want to call it clumps because that's not an accurate term either, but essentially it forms and there are voids where air bubbles exist in the concrete. And if that becomes excessive, you can see a honeycomb type texture to the back of the concrete. So it's a condition that can't be observed until after the concrete has been poured and then the forms have been pulled off of it. It's already set and you can see it in place. So we did inspect some curbs with that condition in the 2021 program. We did reject them as part of our inspection process, and Strasser removed them and re-poured them in appropriate methods.
Thank Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? All right. Do we want this on consent, or do we want this on regular?
Consent's fine.
All right.
I would say regular, since I anticipate some constituents wanting to comment.
Okay. All right. Regular agenda, please. All right, the items E, items from council office. Part of the calendar or schedule that we had outlined earlier this year included an environmental resolution for April and recognizing April 2022 as Earth Day. Mr. Van Meter was kind enough to put together a brief resolution based on MORPC language on the MORPC model resolution. And I know that, I guess I'll just leave it open to discussion with that. If there are any comments?
I'd like to pass out, I wrote a different, with all due respect to whoever wrote this one, but I think that Earth Day, as I remember, as I have thought of it, is more of a local thing, more of a nature type environment thing. And I did this afternoon, there's probably typos, I tried to, and it can be changed, but it's more locally, let me pass this out too.
Thank you.
But I think, as I think of Earth Day, I think of more that, on a local level, we have 750 acres of parkland, we have trails. Over and over again, our residents tell us that they like the trails and they like the parks, and I think that, in my mind, the resolution honoring Earth Day should be more about what Gahanna has done and to encourage people and to just applaud them for the things they've done. Like we have people that, groups that do litter pickups. I know there's a group on one of our neighborhoods off Cherry Bottom that the fourth Saturday, I want to say, of every month, they walk up and down Cherry Bottom and pick up litter. And which seems like it's not a small task, and I'm always amazed at how many bags of trash they have. But it just seems that we should be more, in my mind, it seemed like we should be more encouraging and appreciating what we have in our parks here, rather than going too far afield of the environment. And so I just thought I'd put this out there and for whatever.
It could be separated, I think.
And you can look at it. I mean, I can send it out electronically. I just didn't have time to do that tonight. So.
Thank you, Mrs. McGregor. We appreciate your effort.
Perhaps we could do one with Earth Day and one with about the goals of MORPC sustainability agenda, and keep that part going and have two separate ones.
Yeah.
Because I think this does it as well, but this is obviously, planet. We used to go in Cleveland, take pictures of the Cuyahoga River right there, and it would be on fire. In the 1960s, it would be on fire. And so we would take those pictures and say, oh, this is not exactly the planet we want, is it? So, and my husband would bring it back and show it to his people as well.
Well, the air is, everybody wants clean air and people want to have clean water to drink, but I just think that the one seemed to be more of more national issues and not necessarily local things that we have done in Gahanna, and it just seemed like we should recognize the things we have done.
And I agree with that, in terms of the planet Earth and whatever, and what we're doing in our own particular place here. But the other part of this being that for the first time ever, we had good air quality for 2021, which is quite an achievement. And it's probably because most people were working from home, but it still, it does make that thing. And indeed, I noticed that we had two electric, Mayor? 2 electric?
We have 6 overall throughout
there-
the city,
I saw
but
the
there's
2
2
that
out
are
here.
right there.
Right, the final 2 are out
I think that
here.
could go into your sustainability, trying to get us up to gold.
Right, and I know, if I recall, we have money in the budget for this year. There's, Morpsey has a regional development issue with regard to EV charging stations. It's more development oriented.
But I think that's getting us into the place where we want to be on, in terms of gold and then platinum, because we want to get to platinum. So anyway, I think both of those things would work that hard.
Any other comments? Mr. Renner?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I really do enjoy and love the items that were put on here, especially talking about the trails and bragging about how much parkland space, with the emphasis on natural resources. I don't really have any problems with just making an amalgam of this proposed that we have on our agenda plus these things. I have probably a different view that climate action is not just a national or a state, but it's a very much a local issue, and that local residents can definitely take action to help their carbon footprint in multitude of ways. And so I think that is definitely in the same vector as Earth Day. So I would like to see more of, putting these together, talking about the local, and with the climate goals that we talk about, their climate change, the impact, and what have you. That's my 2 cents.
Yes, Mrs. Angelou.
Nancy, I think you're right, too, because 750 acres of parkland is really a lot of acreage for a community of 36,000, and I don't think I think we probably have the most in the region. So this is, I think we need to put them both together, or have 2. Yeah. It is what it is. Thank you for doing that, Nancy. Thank you for doing that.
So one idea might be that since we can do one maybe on the 4th, and then we can do the Earth Day local one on the 18th, and perhaps, okay, Mr. Schnetzer.
I tend to agree with Council President Renner. I kind of like the idea of just maybe doing one. Not necessarily, my position is not that it has to be either or here, but just one, recognizing Earth Day, talking about the things that the city has done, that this community has done, and things that we endeavor to do in the future. So in that vein, I guess I don't have any issues with the topics and the sentiment that's expressed in Mrs. McGregor's draft. Just a couple of comments about the draft that's on iLegislate. I guess words matter at some point, and so there are just a couple of things that I want to throw out there for consideration. There's reference to, I believe, alternative fuel vehicles. I think perhaps a more appropriate phrase would be a diversity of transportation, something along those lines that would include things like, bus lines, would also include perhaps, I know Mrs. Angelou, you've talked a lot about it. There's that rail system that's kind of, from Pittsburgh to Chicago. So if there was just a phrase that would kind of capture all of that. And then also a little bit further down, there's talk about, where is it here? I lost it, I apologize. Affordable housing options. I just want to be cognizant that within the government realm, that has a very specific phrasing, or has a very specific meaning. So just in recognition that we do have a future land use plan that's been adopted, and maybe incorporating some of the sentiment that's expressed in that document, again, a more appropriate phrase would be something along the lines of diverse housing stock or something along those lines. So just a couple of thoughts for consideration for the group.
I really appreciate both of those edits. Madam Mayor, yes.
Trying to get your attention. Thank you. If it might help, if you are oh, that's really loud, Kevin, thank you. If you are going to look to incorporate both of these versions perhaps into one, the week of Earth Day, I think, is the next committee of the whole meeting, I'm not sure, or perhaps the week before. I do know that we do have, as I've shared with all of you before, have been working on a sustainability task force internally. That is getting to the point where we are getting ready for public engagement. We do have some plans for the week of Earth Day to kind of share that. We also have a new sustainability initiative that we'll be rolling out. We are partnering with SWACO on a social media campaign as well that will all time very nicely if you were to issue a resolution more right toward Earth Day. It gives you another committee of the whole meeting to come back and look at some joint version of what the two versions are that you shared today. So just want to throw that out from a timing standpoint.
Mr. Schnetzer.
Yeah, Julie's probably done some great work that might be worth incorporating in.
We are we've been named a tree city again, USA, yes, and certainly the certified arboretum and having that open its 1-year anniversary as well as the conservation area that it is now at Creekside Island are definitely worth. But I know Julie, I'm sure, could provide some additional talking points.
I wasn't sure about the Tree City again, so I didn't put that.
We
but
just
I
got
thought
news
about
of that. We just got, taking all of my press release comments, but yes, we just received word from that not long ago.
What's the one with the bees? There's one that,
Pollinator, yeah.
Bees,
pollinator, we're also pollinator,
Did we get that? Yes, I think we did too.
yeah.
Well, that was last year.
Okay. Well, like I said, this was just my idea, and it doesn't mean that we couldn't put the two together at all. That's just,
Okay,
I mean, I'm willing to do that.
that sounds great. Mr. Van Meter, if you wouldn't mind maybe taking a stab at blending these together, and
Absolutely.
we can, and taking into consideration Mr. Schnetzer's comments, and I think adding maybe a couple more points.
I can help if you want.
I was going to say.
Okay, thank you.
You can also, I believe I did a proclamation last year that would have Gahanna-specific details in that. I'm not going to issue another proclamation and duplicate efforts, so you can pull from there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. So maybe we'll have this back on Committee of the Whole for the 11th, if that's acceptable, with a plan to have the resolution on the agenda for the 18th. Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys.
That's it.
If there's nothing else on the agenda for tonight, that concludes our Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, March 28th.
28 minutes.
7:30.